There's a leadership trap out there that almost nobody talks about, and it's costing your team right now. And it's not having a toxic boss. It's not burnout. It's not having a poor strategy. It's actually about being too nice. And have you ever had, you as a boss or a manager, have you ever had to talk to somebody and you were probably upset with them? They weren't doing something right. Maybe some teammates were complaining about this person, and you had to have a conversation with them. And behind closed doors, you're really direct. They did this, this, and that, and they need to change, and you're really strong. And then when it comes time to actually have that conversation, that person sits down, you're eyeball to eyeball. You don't come across like that at all. You actually soften everything. You kind of avoid the hard conversations because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And you're afraid what you're going to say is going to hurt their feelings. And you end up being too nice. And that's what's called being a natural people pleaser. That's what I am. Like my nature is to be a people pleaser. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. But when you become a manager and when you become a leader, you have to choose to address people even when it may hurt their feelings. And I was having conversations, but I was watering down the message with people. I was hoping they would get it, but a lot of times they didn't get it. And you know what? Nothing changed. And the team suffered longer than they should have. And I would fold like a cardboard table when I was having conversations with people that I needed to be more direct with, but instead I ended up being too nice. And one of the reasons that this was tough for me is because I didn't really have a plan or a playbook on how to address that. And that's what I want to talk to you in this video about, is how do you have those tough conversations? How can you be direct and still come across professional? How can you be clear without being a jerk? I've been managing people for well over 15 years. And I was in a department where when I got hired, it was just me. I was the only person. But as we grew, I found myself having a couple people to manage, and then it turned into teams. And then now, we have departments that have come out of the company that I'm in. So I've been through all these crazy, poor manager conversations, and I want to help you if you're struggling with that. And here are some signs that this may be you, is you soften feedback. You avoid hard conversations. Maybe you prioritize harmony over growth. And that was my MO. Like, I wanted everyone to be happy, friendly, like family, everybody get along. That was kind of the metric that I was measuring everything, was everybody getting along. But you know how it is. The more people that come in, the more personalities. That just isn't the metric that you should be using in regards to being effective and efficient and getting things done. So how do you have these hard conversations when you're a natural people pleaser and you tend to be like me, where you soften the feedback when you're talking to somebody? So the problem isn't that you care too much. It's that you care too much to tell them the truth. And hopefully this framework that I'm going to talk about today is going to help you with that. And I got this framework from a book called Radical Candor, written by Kim Scott. And she calls this ruinous empathy. And she says that's responsible for the vast majority of management mistakes. And I can totally attest to that. See, we need to have a mindset shift. We need to shift how we're approaching these conversations with people. And we have to shift from being nice as the goal. The shift is to be clear. That's the goal. And this isn't about being harsh. It's just a shift from being nice to being clear. Nice protects your comfort. I'm somebody who loves comfort. I seek comfort. I seek pleasure. So nice protects your comfort. No wonder I was, holding back on some of these conversations, avoiding them and softening the feedback. But clear protects your team. And as a manager and a leader, you need to be looking out what's best for your team, not what's best for your comfort. This is something I had to learn, and this book really helped me with that. And there are 3 steps plus a framework that really changed everything for me. And step 1 is about caring personally. And you have to see people as humans first, not just like performance problems. I've worked with people where they looked at people as performance problems, issues, like that person was the issue. But we have to look at who we're talking to as a human. They have things going on. When you have real conversations with people, a lot of times, you start to understand where they're coming from, why they're reacting like this, why they said that. And you have to look at them as a human first. And you have to build the relationship before you deliver the critique. See, the relationship is the runway the hard conversation lands on. And what that means is the longer you're in a relationship with someone, the more history you have, the more experience you have with that person, the more things you've gone through with that person. So when you have a tough conversation with people sometimes, I've had, there's people I've worked with for years and years and years, and when I've had to sit them down, they would say something like, well, you never support me. You always do this or you always do that. When you have a long relationship, you can look back and say like, I know it looks like I am not supporting you, or I'm always against you, but look at all these things that we've done together. Look at this, and that. The longer that relationship is, the longer that runway is, so that when you have a hard conversation, it's going to land better versus having a hard conversation right off the bat with no relationship. So without a relationship, your directness really comes across as criticism. But with a relationship, your directness is more like an investment. You're investing into that person. And the longer that you've been with them, the more they'll see and understand that you're not just coming at them. So you want to help them, and it should be like an investment, not a criticism. So that's the first step of caring personally. The second step is about challenging directly. And with challenging directly comes a framework on how you do this. So challenging directly, you have to stop softening the blow. You have to tell people exactly where they're falling short. And this is something that I struggled with, was I would soften the blow. Clear is kind. Being clear to somebody is being kind to them. Unclear is being unkind to them. And when you water down feedback, it steals their chance to grow. When I read this stuff, I was like, that's exactly right. I'm not being clear because I think that I'm going to be mean, but that isn't the case. If I'm not clear, I'm robbing them of the ability of them to show that they can grow, that they can do it right. I had to have the courage to have that conversation, and I have more courage to have that conversation, especially years ago. I would have that conversation, it just wouldn't come out right. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the framework. I'm an emotional guy. So a lot of times when I would get talking and they would say something to me that kind of caught me off guard or was almost like they were attacking me, then I would get emotional and I would get almost offensive, at them. And the conversation just started to go off track. But having a framework, which is what I'm going to tell you next, is really what helped with this. So the framework is, first of all, with a framework, you have to write this out before the conversation begins. there's 3 parts to this framework. And the first part is, it's what's the situation? Like, what was actually happening? And you have to get the facts. You have to write this down. And the reason it's important to write it down is because in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the conversation, this is going to keep you centered and it's going to keep you anchored on the facts and not allow your emotions to get involved and for you to start saying things that you really don't mean. So what's the situation? What really happened? And the other important reason that you have to write this down is because a lot of the times you personally, as the manager, the leader, you weren't there to see what happened. You didn't witness the situation. So you're getting this from the employees, people that saw it. So you want to write it down on what happened. So the second thing is, what was the behavior? What specifically was seen or heard? What did you see? What have you heard? What was the behavior when this situation happened? Write it down. Have facts on it. Don't just go by memory, because a lot of times your memory is going to fail you in moments where they say something that is going to take you off an emotional track that you shouldn't be going down. So what's the situation? What was the behavior that this person did? And then the third thing is, what is the impact? What the behavior that happened, how did that impact the team? What is it doing to the team? They need to know how it's affecting the team. They need to know that, hey, the behavior during this situation, this is how it appears. This is the impact that it's happening, that's happened. And to the person that you're talking to, they may not even realize it. They may not even know it. It may be totally eye-opening that they're like, I had no idea. I mean, I've had people come to me and say things, and I was completely blindsided. I had no idea that when I was saying these things, that it was, creating, problems with the team. I'll give you an example. My background is sales, and I work in an aviation company, and we would book private charter flights. And then when those flights would book, you had to have pilots to fly the planes. So I was booking the trips, and the pilots would have to go fly. And we were getting busy. We had a lot of business going on. And this saying popped into my mind when people would walk through the office. They'd walk through my office and they'd be like, hey Seth, how's it going? I'm like, good. I'm just booking trips and taking names. And that was like a funny catchphrase. In my mind, I was, kind of being sarcastic, but it was just something I would say. And it just kind of stuck. Hey Seth, what's going on? Nothing, man. Just booking trips and taking names. I'm just booking trips and taking names. Well, on pilots, that's all they, every time I would book a trip, then they would have to go and leave their family and fly and do all that. I mean, that's their job, but it was affecting them negatively, and I had no idea. So the chief pilot ended up coming to me and said, hey, you know how you say, booking trips and taking names? You need to just not say that around the pilots. You need to not say that around here. And that was eye-opening to me. I didn't realize that my behavior, the words that I was using, was having a negative impact on the team or other employees. That's what having a framework does. That's what challenging, directly. That's what being clear with somebody. That's what having facts when you're talking to somebody can do. It can open the eyes of the person that you're talking to. And a lot of times they have no idea. They didn't mean to say it that way. They didn't mean to come across like a jerk. But you have to have those conversations in order to get the team going in the right direction again, or that person. So this framework, it kept me on the facts. It kept me away from being emotional. I'm not scrambling on the spot. That doesn't work. And once I used this framework, situations were addressed more quickly, and I noticed the team got healthier. The team got healthier faster. People knew exactly what needed to change. And I've seen this in other departments too. The longer a leader delays having these conversations or dealing directly with somebody, the worse the damage, happens. And I've seen it to where employees are leaving companies because of the manager that they're dealing with just wasn't effective. They weren't being straightforward. They were watering down conversations. Change wasn't happening. They were enabling bad behavior. They were allowing mediocre behavior because the manager was afraid or uncomfortable or didn't know how to have a conversation to be direct and clear. So you can be direct and respectful. That's actually the most caring thing you can do for your team. And remember, you as the manager and the leader, your job is to protect the team. Your job is to look out after the team. And one person, one bad behavior, one person that is, not up to standard, if you allow that to go on, it's negatively affecting your whole team. So you have to care about your team. Now, step 3, and this is where I invite some pushback, is that most leaders skip this. They take it as well. You need to take this as well as you dish it out. What do I mean by that? Like when you need to, when you're having these conversations, you need to let your team know too that, hey, you need to point things out to me. You need to tell me like what my blind spots are. We all have blind spots. So you need to be open for correction to come to you as well. And a lot of times in these conversations, what you thought was a bad behavior going on with the person that you're talking to, it's actually because you, as the manager, weren't upfront. You softened things haven't changed, and things got worse because of how you were leading and managing. So you have to take this feedback as well. You need to encourage your team to challenge you, to ask for their honest take. And you need to trust. This is how trust is built, when truth flows in both directions. It's not just about you having a framework to talk to your team. You have to invite your team to be able to give you feedback and be truthful and honest and open with you. And the result is that when you do all 3 of these things, that teams stop whispering and they start having honest conversations. People begin to grow faster. They know where they stand. They have more psychological safety. In Proverbs chapter 27, verse 6, it says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." What does that mean? When you're a friend to somebody and you say something to them that could be like hurt, if you say something to them in a criticizing type way or a corrective type way, or you're not being clear with them, it actually can come across as like a wound with a friend because you have a relationship with them. Those words, they hurt. You're kind of wounding them. But an enemy multiplies kisses, meaning you can actually act as an enemy by softening things down and almost like blowing kisses. You're telling the person that you're not being truthful with them. You're telling them almost like, they're better than they are. You're not being clear and direct with what is going on. You're like blowing kisses. You're like, you see what I'm saying? Like that's how an enemy is. They're deceitful, hypocritical. You don't want to be that way. You want to be direct and clear, and sometimes that can hurt. Just like when you have a talk with a friend and it feels like it wounds them. But this is about being direct and clear. And extraordinary leaders, they care enough to tell the truth. And I want to recommend, get the book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. The link is in the description. And listen, try this framework. What's the situation? What's the behavior? What's the impact it's having? Write that down before your next tough conversation or the next time that you have to deal with an issue that's going on with somebody. So thanks for watching this, and I'll see you on the next one.